Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Alvino. I'm the Trails Program Manager at the District Department of Transportation. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight for this public meeting, the first public meeting for the rehabilitation of the Suitland Parkway Trail. We're going to give folks just another minute to get settled and join us. We're seeing people start to fill up in the virtual meeting space. So thanks, and bear with us. We'll get started in just a minute or two. Great. Well, I think we should go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Michael Albino. I'm the Trails Program Manager at the District Department of Transportation. And I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. This is the first public meeting for the conceptual engineering for the rehabilitation of the Suitland Parkway Trail. To get started, we're going to go over some of the housekeeping for the virtual meeting space, the WebEx. So I'm going to turn it over to our colleague, Karen LeBlanc, who will walk through how to use this WebEx space.
Good evening, everybody. As Michael said, my name is Karen LeBlanc. I'm here on behalf of the consultant team working with DDOT on the Suitland Parkway Trail Rehabilitation Concept Engineering Project, and we thank you all for being here. Before we do start the presentation, there are a couple of housekeeping slides. First of all, just to let you know, this is an open meeting and it is being recorded. If you would prefer not to have your question at the end of the presentation recorded, you can certainly email one of the members of our team afterwards, and we will be able to answer your questions at that time. In addition to that, this recording will be available on DDOT's YouTube site within 7 days of the project. So if you know of somebody who is unable to attend, or if you just want to view it again yourself, it will be available on that website. The meeting is also being live streamed to DDOT's Facebook page, and we will be checking back and forth with the Facebook page once we get to the Q&A session to make sure that we answer any questions that people may have on that platform as well. If you do need technical support during the meeting, please call this number 202-253-9320, and somebody on the at the Office of Information Technology will be able to assist you. Next slide. Everybody is on mute except for obviously the people that are presenting. You will not be able to unmute yourself. During the Q&A session, we will be taking questions throughout in the order that I see them, and I'll be moderating the Q&A with answers from our DDOT team and the consulting team. And just wanted to make sure that people knew that. So if you're trying to unmute yourself, that is unavailable to you at this time. And then also during the Q&A, if you could use the raise your hand feature, which I'm going to show you in just a second. It's down on the bottom right side of your screen. That will also be helpful to make sure that we address everybody's questions throughout the evening. Next. If you do have a question or comment, again, the raise your hands is down on the bottom of your screen. Over to the right, you just see it's just a button that looks like a raised hand. You just go ahead and click that, and we'll be able to see that in the participant screen. Next. Oh, I'm so sorry. Just one more thing. If you're on the phone, and if we've had somebody who's called in, if you hit the *3 on your phone, *3, then that will also let us know that it will raise a hand on the phone number you're calling in on, and we'll be able to see that you have a question. Next slide. If you want to post a question during the presentation, to the bottom right-hand side, also you'll see the Q&A. Also, there's a three-dot icon to the right. If you don't see your Q&A, it should pop up there as well. Just click on that feature. Then below that, you'll see a small screen that you can type in your question to, and then just hit send. And that will post the question to the Q&A box, and then we'll be able to see all the questions in order that they come in. Next. There's also a chat available. We'll be monitoring the chat as well. If you feel more comfortable using the chat and you're more familiar with that feature, then go right ahead and use that as well. We're going to make sure that we monitor that also, just to make sure that we can hear from everybody who has an interest in and would like to ask a question. And then I'm going to hand this back over to Michael, who will give the presentation this evening.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. So welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Michael Alvino. I'm the project manager for this project, one that we're very excited about and looking forward to sharing with you this evening. I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Deputy Project Manager Stephanie Paperno at DDOT, as well as the design team that will be assisting DDOT with this project from the firm of VHB, our project manager, Jim Long, as well as subject matter experts in the fields of civil engineering and design, surveying, street lighting, as well as Karen, who you've already met from the public engagement team. So I will be giving the presentation tonight, so you'll be hearing from me, but as we get into the Q&A, and there will be an opportunity for us to answer your questions at the end of the presentation, I may defer to some of my colleagues who are the subject matter experts in those areas. Our agenda for tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Suitland Parkway, and then talk a little bit about the context of the project and things that we're thinking of, and ask your feedback of things that we should be thinking of. Talk a little bit about where we are today, what's coming up next, and then again at the end of the meeting we'll have time to get your feedback, not just at the end of this meeting, but moving forward after the meeting as well. And again, just to reiterate what Karen said, feel free at any time to put your questions in the Q&A function or raise your hand. But we will be going through the presentation and then taking those questions at the end. So to start with, I think we'd just like to get a sense of who's in the room, the virtual room that is, and see what level of experience and familiarity people might have with Suitland Parkway, specifically the Suitland Parkway Trail. So you should see on your screen popping up a couple of poll questions. The first question is very simple. Do you use the Suitland Parkway Trail? You might have been on there many times. Maybe you commute on it every day. Maybe you've never been there before, or maybe you live nearby, but you don't use it for any number of reasons. So feel free to click and let us know, just so we can get a sense of how familiar people are with the trail. The second question that you'll see is, how often do you use the Suitland Parkway Trail? And again, maybe you ride it every day, or you walk on it every day, or maybe you've never been there before and you're just looking to get some more information. So please let us know, and I'll give folks a chance to answer those questions. So those questions will remain up for about another 3 minutes. And while people are answering those questions, we'll continue on, but we'll circle back and share the results and see how people have been answering those questions. So while you're still answering those questions, I'll get started talking a little bit about just the history of Suitland Parkway. This is a picture from 1962 across from the other side of Sheridan Road, looking at Sheridan Road and some of those buildings that still look similar today. This area along the Suitland Parkway really began developing in the 1930s, and especially in the 1940s with the war effort in World War II. During the war, much of this area was used as military housing, as well as there were offices associated with the war effort. We'll talk a little bit about when the parkway was constructed, and then when the trail was constructed as well. Suitland Parkway was initially constructed in 1943 and opened to the public later in 1944. And the purpose was really to connect Bolling Airfield, what is today known as Joint Base Anacostia Bolling, with Andrews Air Force Base, or what is now known as Joint Base Andrews. So it was really part of the defense effort. It was really used for defense employees going between those two bases. These pictures that you're looking at here on the top left of your screen, this is actually from modern day Alabama Avenue, looking south towards the District Maryland line and Southern Avenue. On the bottom left, what you're seeing is the construction of what they call the B Road. The parkway was actually constructed in two sections, what they called A and B. The inbound and outbound lanes were constructed separately. The A road, which I believe was the northbound lanes, was constructed first and was used as a two-way road. And then about a year later, the B road, the southbound lanes were finished, and it was converted to 2 lanes inbound and 2 lanes outbound. And then the last picture is again looking from the area of Alabama Avenue south towards Southern Avenue. Here's some more images of the initial construction of Suitland Parkway. On the top, this is looking towards modern day Alabama Avenue, and what you see is the construction of the bridge of Alabama Avenue over Suitland Parkway. The second picture on the bottom left is from modern day Stanton Road, that you might be familiar with the busy intersection there of Stanton and Suitland Parkway. And then on the right, this is back up near the northern end of the project, or Suitland Parkway, closer to Sheridan. And both of these pictures are of the construction of the bridge of Alabama Avenue over Suitland Parkway. So as I mentioned, the parkway itself was constructed in 1944 and opened to the public, and that was done as a project of what was then known the War Department, what now we would call the Department of Defense. This property, after the war was over, was transferred to the National Park Service for administration in 1949. And then later in 1973, the property in the parkway was transferred to the District of Columbia. So you might, some people might think that similar to other parkways in the region, the Rock Creek Parkway or George Washington Parkway, that it's administered by the National Park Service. But in this particular case, this parkway is administered by the District Department of Transportation. So I want to pause here and see if we're able to share the results of the poll. If not, we'll come back to that at the end of the meeting. So thank you all for filling that out. Well, shifting gears here for a second, we want to talk about sort of the regional network of trails that exists in the National Capital Region, in the district, in Maryland and Virginia. And Suitland Parkway and the trail specifically is an element of this regional network of trails for pedestrians and bicyclists, what is known as the Capital Trails Network. And so regionally, there exists over 400, almost 500 miles of these trails throughout the region. And there's really an effort to connect these trails to make them more useful for opportunities for recreation, to connect them with jobs and employment centers, and to connect neighborhoods so that people have access to these great resources. Within this regional vision, there are plans to build an additional 400 miles of trail throughout the region, of which Suitland Parkway is a key part. Zooming in from the regional level down more towards a neighborhood scale, we do have a vision of extending Suitland Parkway, the Suitland Parkway Trail, I should say. So if you're familiar with the trail, if you're one of the folks who said that they've been on it before, you're probably aware that it currently ends right now at the intersection of Sheridan Road and Pomeroy Avenue on the north end. And it currently dead ends at the intersection of Southern Avenue or under Southern Avenue at the DC Maryland line. Ultimately, we'd like to extend this trail on the north along Suitland Parkway all the way to the new Frederick Douglass Bridge. It's just a short distance away, as well as continuing to extend it to the south into Maryland. And we're working with our partners at the National Park Service who administer the Suitland Parkway in the state of Maryland they have plans to extend that trail from the DC Maryland line all the way to the Naylor Road Metro and to the Henson Creek Trail. So ultimately, we see this as a major element of that, both neighborhood as well as a regional infrastructure for pedestrians and bicyclists. Zooming in for this particular project, we're really focused on rehabilitating the existing Suitland Parkway Trail. As I mentioned before, it currently ends at the intersection of Sheridan Road Southeast and Pomeroy Road Southeast. At the north end, and at the south end, it currently dead ends at Southern Avenue at the DC Maryland line. And I think this is a little bit indicative of how trails and pedestrian infrastructure may have been built in the past, where it just sort of ended on the side of the road. We're really looking to think more holistically, more modernly, and make these connections so that they're really useful for people and for neighborhoods. So we were able to show you a lot of information about the construction of Suitland Parkway itself, but there's very little information about the construction of the Suitland Parkway Trail. We estimate that the trail was built in the early to mid 1990s based on historic aerial photography. We believe that it was put in as part of a utility project. But based on that, and it's probably reached the end of its useful life. That said, we're working to maintain it, and that includes sweeping the trail, trimming the trees along the trail, and maintaining the asphalt. So if you do see any concerns out on the trail, please call 311 and report that to us. You can also submit that online. And we'll talk a little bit about the timeline for the full-scale rehabilitation. So we are working on fully rehabilitating this trail, completely reconstructing it, and we'll talk a lot about that tonight. But in the interim, please continue to report those issues that you see. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the considerations that we're thinking about as we move forward with this project to rehabilitate the Suitland Parkway Trail. So there's just a couple things that we want to keep in mind. And first and foremost is the trail user experience. So what will pedestrians feel like when they're walking down the trail? If you're walking your dog or pushing a stroller, if you're riding a bike or riding a scooter, what are the things that are going to make a person feel safe and feel like they want to be there specifically? Another thing that we're planning for this project is lighting, street lighting. Right now, the Suitland Parkway is not lit. And so we would propose and like to illuminate both sides of the roadway, both the roadway and the trail. Right now, there are safety issues, both for motorists and for trail users, and increasing the levels of lighting along the corridor, both the roadway and the trail, we really feel would have a big benefit from a safety perspective. But we're also sensitive to the environment. and really looking at options that will target the lighting down on the surfaces, on the roadway, on the trail to minimize impacts to wildlife. As we get into studying some of the options for improving this trail, we're also going to be doing our best to maintain and preserve the existing trees and the existing tree canopy as much as possible. And that includes protecting our what we call heritage and special trees, which are the biggest, oldest trees that are protected here in the District of Columbia, as well as this really great community resource, which is the community orchard down at the intersection of Irving Street and 22nd Street at the Parkway. If you're not familiar with this, this is a community orchard that is administered by DDOT's own Urban Forestry Department. These are special heirloom species of fruit trees. There are pomegranate, persimmons, peaches, cherry, apple. When these are in blossom and in bloom in the summer, spring, summer, and fall months, they're yours to enjoy. So if you haven't been there, I highly encourage you to check it out. This is a really great resource in this neighborhood. As well as looking at existing topography. So in many cases, we're going to be looking to relocate the trail, push it further away from the roadway where there's high-speed traffic. And in some cases, we'll be able to do that where the topography allows. So we've completed a topographic survey. We've identified, sort of where are the flat areas like here on the left-hand side of the screen where we can probably move the trail further away from the roadway. However, in other locations, there's very steep slopes, such as here. This is in the vicinity of 18th Street. On the right-hand side of your screen, where it's really steep, we may be limited in our ability to move the trail further off of the roadway. And then the next consideration, and this is really going to be a major one moving forward as we work to design this project and eventually move it into construction, is coordination with existing utilities. There are a number of utilities below the trail as well as the roadway, and those include electrical, water, sewer, gas, storm drains. And that has really inhibited some of the efforts to fully rehabilitate this trail in the past and do some of the more serious maintenance needs that need to be done. So this is going to be something that we'll be working on and coordinating with the various utility agencies as we move forward. Additionally, we're going to be looking at ways to increase access points to the trail. So if you're familiar with the trail, you might know that there's really only 3 places that a person can walk on or off of the trail. And that's at Sheridan Road Southeast, at Stanton Road, and at Irving Street Southeast. So it's almost a 2-mile trail with really only 3 places to get on or off. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at is what are some of the other locations that we can add additional ramps or sidewalks or crossings that will make it easier for people to get to the trail and to use the trail. So one of the things that we'll be asking, and I'll ask you to keep in mind, is think of what those locations might be. If there's a place, if you live in the neighborhood and you'd like to get on the trail or on the Parkway at one of those locations, by all means, please let us know. And then additionally, we'll be looking at other trail amenities and opportunities, things that we can do to make people feel more comfortable, feel safer on the trail. One of the things that we've learned on other trail projects throughout the city and in working with our partners throughout the region is people feel a lot safer, a lot more secure if they know where they are. So adding signage, wayfinding signage, emergency response markers, so that if, God forbid, there is an incident on the trail, they're able to call 911 or 311 and report, their exact location. And if they're not familiar with the area, that they can navigate to some of the great destinations in the community. As well, we'll be looking at opportunities to improve the environment. We'll talk a little bit about there is a stream restoration project happening in proximity to the trail that is being done by the National Park Service and Department of Energy and Environment, the Stickfoot branch. So we'll be looking to coordinate with that project, as well as identify opportunities to improve stormwater management so that we're capturing stormwater before it runs off into the sewer system and treating it on site. So again, as we get into the Q&A and ask for your feedback, keep in mind, what are some things that you might like to see on a trail, some of the amenities that you would be interested in. As well as we really want to keep safety first and foremost in mind. Suitland Parkway, the Parkway, both the roadway for motorists as well as the trail for trail users. We've identified a number of safety issues. There are a lot of locations where people are crossing the Parkway, in particular crossing where there are not intersections or not crosswalks. Here at Irving Street, there's a clear desire line where people are crossing the Parkway from one community to the next. And it's really become a safety issue. And so in addition to the street lighting that we're proposing to add, we're also going to be looking at ways to improve safety along the corridor, both for motorists as well as for trail users, pedestrians, and bicyclists. So we know that certainly accessing the trail and people crossing the Parkway are big issues. So we're going to be looking at what are some things that we can do to improve the feelings of safety and the actual results of safety. So again, if you have suggestions there or issues that you've seen or witnessed on the Parkway or the trail, please by all means let us know in your feedback. So now we've talked a little bit about the things that are on our mind as we moved into this project, some of the things that we've been thinking about, some of the considerations. Now we're going to show you a little bit of some of the recommendations or options that we've developed, and we'd love to get your feedback on. Again, this is the first public meeting of what we hope to be several for the project. So these are just options for now, and we'd love to get your feedback and use your feedback to help generate better alternatives and options as we move forward. So as I mentioned before, based on the topography, in some locations where it allows, we're able to push the trail away from the existing roadway. Right now, if you're familiar with the trail, it's right up against those two lanes of traffic, those two northbound lanes, with just a short little curb between trail users and the roadway. So in those locations where the topography is relatively flat and there's open spaces, we're going to be looking to move the trail 15 feet away from the roadway so that people who are using the trail aren't right up against next to that high-speed, high-moving traffic. We've also identified a couple locations where there were roads that existed before the Parkway itself was built. And in this case, where we can move the trail more than 20 feet off the edge of the roadway, it might feel, you might not even feel like you're along Suitland Parkway at all, where there would be space to add a tree or a wooded buffer between the trail and the roadway itself. So in a couple locations, we've identified where this might be possible, and we're calling this the cross-country trail. And in some locations, based on the topography and the trees, we might not be able to move the trail too far away from the roadway. So in those locations, we're going to be looking at adding a protective barrier between the roadway and the trail. So even if you're still right up against the roadway, there would at least be some kind of crash barrier, some type of railing or fence that would prevent you from going into the roadway, and likewise prevent a car or a truck along the roadway from going up and onto the trail. So based on those different concepts that we've developed, we've identified, sort of laid out some of the initial options of where we could do each of those different, what we call cross sections. So what you see here, this is the northern end of the Suitland Parkway Trail, starting the star on the left is the intersection of Sheridan Road and Pomeroy Road southeast. And that purple line is what we call that cross-country trail, where it would actually be more than 20 feet away from Suitland Parkway, actually behind some trees between the parkway and the trail. And that would be one option there. As we move forward, move towards the south and the east, you see the light blue line. That is the 15-foot buffer. So moving the trail away from the roadway 15 feet or more, so that there's a nice big buffer between the road and the trail. And the orange line that you see there is the existing trail, already sort of veers those 15 feet away from the parkway, and we would reconstruct that trail. As we mentioned before, there's limited spaces to get on or off the trail, so we've identified some space that's just based on the topography near Elvins Road. There could be a future connection there at some point in the future. As we move along the corridor further south and east, this on the left-hand side of your screen, the gray star is the intersection of Stanton Road and Suitland Parkway. And so that red area is where, based on the topography and based on some of the other utilities, we might not be able to move the trail further away from the road. So we would look at adding a new barrier between the trail and the roadway. And then again, with the blue being pushing the trail 15 feet off the back of the road. And here at Gainesville Street, we've identified another location that, based on topography, could be a potential access point between the neighborhood and the trail. Right now, if you live in the neighborhood or live on Gainesville Street or 18th Street, you'd have to go around to Stanton Road to get on the trail, when it might be easier, depending on your destination, to get on or off at Gainesville Street. So continuing to move east, this is just off the screen from the last slide. So you see Gainesville Street on the left. This is the area where the Department of Energy and Environment and the National Park Service are working on restoring the Stickfoot Branch, which is the stream that runs from the end of the intersection of Hartford Street and 22nd Street southeast, and actually continues down under the parkway. So one of the options there would be partnering with that project and moving the trail further back into the woods along the stream, which would provide a much different experience for the trail, more of similar maybe to Rock Creek Park Trail, where you're along the creek further from the roadway. Or as an alternative, we could reconstruct the trail along the existing parkway in that area, as well as adding new access at Irving Street Southeast. And then as we get to the end of the Suitland Parkway Trail, looking at adding new connections between Suitland Parkway and Alabama Avenue, which is certainly one of the busier thoroughfares in the area. Better access to some of the commercial destinations, some of the stores. If you're going along the parkway, you might want to get off and go to some of the shops there. Down south of Alabama Avenue, the topography gets a little bit tighter, so we'd be looking at adding that barrier between the trail and the roadway. And then we saw at the beginning of the presentation where the trail currently dead ends right at the Maryland line. Although our colleagues at the National Park Service are looking to extend that trail, we'd also like to extend it at a ramp up to Southern Avenue, and then perhaps even over to Shipley Terrace Southeast, so that folks in the neighborhood would have better access to the trail. So now that we've shared with you some of the options for improving the trail, some of the things that we're considering for the trail, we're going to ask another pop-up question. So you should get this popping up on your screen. Maybe at the beginning, when you answered those questions, you weren't interested or you hadn't used the trail. But now that you've seen what we're thinking of, let us know, how would you use an improved Suitland Parkway Trail? We'll give you a couple minutes to take that poll. So I can see the results. I'm not sure if everyone's able to see them, but with a lot of people saying that they would walk, jog, or bicycle for exercise, about 45%. And then a couple commuting. And then we've got at least one person who said they still would not use the trail. That's okay. So that question will remain up for about another 3.5 minutes. If you're still taking that poll, go right ahead. I'll continue along. We're coming to the end of the presentation, and we'll be able to open things up for question and answer here in just a minute. So just to share with you our project schedule, this phase of the project we call concept engineering. So this is the first public meeting for the first phase of the project. We're really just getting started. We've developed some existing conditions. We've identified some of those issues that we shared with you. And now we're here to get your feedback, anything that we overlooked, things that we should be thinking about, things you like, things you don't like. We'll take that information back and continue to refine these concepts, and then do our environmental review and document any environmental impacts of what we're proposing, and then come back and share that with you all later this year, probably this summer. And then for us, those next steps, while we're working and doing our due diligence and doing our homework, we'll be coordinating with the various agencies, the National Park Service, the DC Department of Energy and the Environment, as well as the DC Historic Preservation Office. I think I neglected to mention when we were sharing all those great pictures of the history of the Parkway is that in 1995, Suitland Parkway was actually added to the National Register of Historic Places. So it is a historically significant part of the city, and we want to preserve that history as well. And then, as I mentioned before, a big part of this project moving forward is going to be coordination with those utilities, and that's going to take us some time. So we appreciate you bearing with us as we work through doing that due diligence. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be developing draft concepts, completing an environmental review, and then coming back out for the next round of public involvement. As I mentioned, this phase we call concept engineering. So from here, once we've completed this phase and developed the recommendation, we would move the project into design and then construction. Unfortunately, at this time, we don't have concrete details for you on when the design would be completed or when the construction would be completed. So we don't want to get your hopes up that this is happening tomorrow. This is going to be a process. We're really going to be thoroughly vetting all of these concepts, then identifying the environmental impacts, and then pursuing funding to complete the design and the construction of this project. But it is something that we're really excited about and want to hear your feedback on as well. And with that, we look forward to your feedback. So we've got a couple of different ways that you can stay connected with us. So when you close out of this meeting, you'll be able to take a survey, which we'll share with you in the chat. And that survey will be open until March 15th, about a month from today. We'll take your emails. Again, my name is Michael Alvino. You're welcome to email me, as well as if you represent a community group. If you represent an advisory neighborhood commission, we'd be happy to come and give an update, attend your meeting. If you've got a block party or an event, a market, we'd be happy to attend and give an update and talk with you there. You can find more information about this project on the project website, which we'll also share in the chat. And with that, we've concluded the presentation, and we will, I'll turn it over to Karen to open up the Q&A.
Sure, Michael, thank you. That was great. We do have a couple of questions, and I do see one raised hand. So I'm going to go to the raised hand first. Jordan Absalom. I'm going to unmute you for just a second. Oh, he lowered his hand, so maybe not. Okay, I'm going to go to the Q&A then. First, we have, at some point, could you also address the status of the South Cap Bike Trail and any updates regarding the Shepherd Branch Trail?
Yeah, I can answer those questions. So thank you for that question. So the first question was in reference to the South Capitol Street Bicycle Trail. For those in the audience who might not be familiar with that, that is a planned trail that would extend along South Capitol Street from the Frederick Douglass Bridge south along South Capitol Street towards Blue Plains, and then connect into Oxon Hill and Oxon Hill Farm in Maryland, and then in Maryland all the way to National Harbor. So that project has been in development for many years. Last year, at the end of 2022, DDOT received a RAISE grant, which is a federal grant, $10 million to support the construction of that project. So that project, we are currently completing the design, and we do expect to move to construction or to advertise that project for construction this year, and potentially break ground either this year or next year. And the second question was in reference to the Shepherd Branch Trail. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the Shepherd Branch Trail, that refers to an unused section of the Shepherd Branch Railroad, which connected from just south of East Capitol Street on one end, all the way along 295 into Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. So that is a longstanding desire to have a trail there. Unfortunately, that property, the railroad is unused, but is still owned by the railroad company CSX. And we have not been able to acquire the rights to that property to develop that trail.
Okay. The next question is, when you say improve the experience and address stormwater, are there going to be retaining ponds along the trail, like wetland for flowers and animals?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So one of the requirements that we have to meet when we build any transportation infrastructure and trails, where we're adding new impervious surface, surfaces where water cannot get through, we're required to meet certain standards set by the DC Department of Energy and Environment. And just because we're also DDOT, another government agency, we're not exempt from that policy. By all means, we have to meet those standards. So there's a lot of different ways that we do that. Sometimes the asphalt itself is porous. So the asphalt itself, water can infiltrate through, but it's still a firm and stable, sturdy surface. Other ways that we do that are through what we call bioretention. So typically in the city, we don't have enough space for what looks like a pond that you described, but we have bioretention planters, which are boxes that you might have seen along the streets where the soils are deeper and they're layered with different types of stones so that the water, rather than going off into the sewer system, is captured there, slowed down, and then infiltrates into the ground. So once we get into the design, we'll identify, what are the impacts going to be, and then what are the tools in our toolbox so that we can reduce the impacts of having so many impervious surfaces. So what that looks like at the end of the day of the design, we don't quite know yet, but it'll probably be some kind of mixing and matching of, in some locations, you might see those bioretention ponds. You might see the material that we end up using for the trail might be porous. We also get credit for planting new trees and things like that. So it's to be determined on that front, but will be a big consideration moving forward.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question, Stephanie from DDOT answered, but I'll just read it. The question was, who will keep the trail clean and maintenance of light and maintain the lighting? And the answer is DDOT will be responsible for keeping the trail clean and the lighting. The next question is, what type of barrier will be used? Concrete, guardrails, others?
That's a great question. So thank you for that question. The short answer, I think, is we don't know yet. I think, if I can go back to the slide where we identified some of the subsurface utilities that showed that barrier, that'll be sort of one factor, is the utilities under the trail and how deep we can go sort of with a foundation. And I might request one of my colleagues from the project team, Tim Smith or Ryan McAllister, if you're able to speak to that and how we'll coordinate and make those determinations when we get into the design phase.
Yeah, Mike, this is Tim Smith from VHB. I think what you said is perfect. We're still working through those options. We still have to coordinate with the utility providers and just look at the depth of the different types of barriers and how they interact with the vehicles and things like that. So the short answer is we're considering all options. And there's also the historic nature of the Parkway. We'll have to be considering and coordinating with those agencies as well. So.
Thank you for that, Tim.
Yep.
Okay, next question is, how is there going to be a bike trail on Alabama Avenue?
So thank you for that question. As part of this project, there's no plans to have a bike trail on Alabama Avenue. I think one of the things that we want to study is having a ramp come up off the trail from Suitland, the Suitland Trail to Alabama Avenue. So you might have seen, it's kind of wooded, so it's very difficult to walk from Alabama Avenue. Alabama Avenue is up higher down to Suitland Parkway. But we did see some evidence that people are sort of cutting through there. There's a desire to get for pedestrians from Alabama down to Suitland. So that's one thing that we're going to look at.
Okay, the next question comes from Mr. Harrington, who had a question and I think this was more in regards to it being maybe historic designation, but traditionally parkways are unlit. Isn't that a fundamental characteristic that would be protected as part of the parkway's historic designation?
Yeah, thank you for that question. If I could go back to the lighting slide. So a couple things come to mind. One is, we haven't done that sort of coordination with the Historic Preservation Office, and you're right. Most parkways are unlit. However, what we've seen here, particularly on Suitland Parkway, is the patterns of crashes that are happening tend to happen at night. This area is very dark at night, and there are what we're seeing in the data is that the crashes are happening at night. So a couple of years ago, here, the picture that you're seeing on the screen is in the vicinity of Irving Street. There was a fatality of a pedestrian who was crossing the parkway at night and was hit by a car. And so these lights that you see are there already. And so they're mounted on wooden poles, they're temporary poles. And our intention is to make that a permanent addition to the parkway. Primarily for those safety reasons. And the second thing that I want to say is these lights were added after that incident, and they're added in two locations. Right here at Irving Street, where there's sort of a known pattern of pedestrians trying to cross Suitland Parkway, and also at Stanton Road, where the intersection is. So if you see along Stanton Road, there are lights actually on both sides of the roadway in advance of that intersection, because we know that people are crossing. Even though there's a signal there, there are drivers who are coming through it at very high speeds, and particularly at night when there's not a lot of people around. To be frank, sometimes they're running the red light and there may be pedestrians crossing. And so the lights, it's lit up really to improve safety at those locations where we know people are crossing. But certainly coordination with our partners at the Historic Preservation Office, the National Capital Planning Commission, and the National Park Service. This, I imagine, will be one of the big pieces that we'll have to coordinate on.
And just to note that Mr. Harrington loved the idea of the new access points, so that was well received. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Oh, I totally am incorrect. So let me continue going on with the questions. The next question is, will there be a new crosswalk on Alabama Avenue at 24th where the trail connects? That area is very difficult to cross.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I can say I don't think it's something we've looked at. So if it's that is something that we'll have to follow up on. So thank you for that. I don't know if anyone else on the project team has thought of that. Oh, here, yes, 24th Street. That's a great question. I don't have the answer for that. That'll be something that we can look at. So thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Will there be additional bike infrastructure around the entrances to the trail? For example, Alabama Avenue and Southern Avenue do not have a bike lane.
So that isn't something that we've looked at this point. I think the focus has been on rehabilitating the trail and finding new access points, but sort of moving out beyond that, ways people would get to or from the trail hasn't been something that we've looked at yet. So if there are locations you would like to see that or would not like to see that, please let us know in your feedback.
Okay. Are there any thoughts on other entrance exit points onto the trail that crosses the Parkway? A pedestrian bridge or a tunnel? Right now, getting on the trail off Stanton Road, crossing the Parkway can be a challenge with the speeding traffic and the traffic light that only gives you about 15 seconds to cross.
So thank you for that. Yeah, I think one of the challenges of this project is that the trail is on the north side of the Parkway. You know, the Parkway sort of divides two neighborhoods, two communities, and the trail just so happens to be on one side of them. So I think we're sort of struggling to come up with access locations from the south, places for people to cross. And I think really the two locations are the location that you mentioned at Stanton Road. So trying to find ways to add more time to that crossing might be something that we can look at. The other thing that you mentioned was like a bridge or a tunnel. And the one location that I think we've thought about or heard from others is that this crossing here on the screen of 22nd Street Southeast, which is sort of the natural pedestrian desire line, where you've got a neighborhood here on the north side of Suitland Parkway and a couple of shops down along Alabama Avenue. So a bridge is something that we could consider. I think I think we'd love to hear some feedback about whether folks think that would be a good idea, whether folks would prefer not to use a bridge. So I think that's something that we're still looking at and looking for your feedback on.
This is more of a question about, I believe, for Suitland Parkway and not the trail, but can you add more traffic lights along Suitland Parkway?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I don't know. I might have to turn and see if we have any of our traffic engineers or anyone with a traffic engineering background who can talk about that. I think the short answer is maybe we can look at it if there's a need. Ryan or Tim, if you want to provide an answer for that.
Sure, Mike. You know, right now we're just looking at the existing conditions and seeing what opportunities we have, right? Really trying to focus on the trail. Certainly if something, you know, with the trail kind of leads us into considering maybe some timing updates or looking at things like that. Really, it's just we're looking for opportunities, other areas to study, connection points and things like that to make the experience better for the trail user, really. Is that okay, Mike?
Yeah, thank you for that.
Sure.
And I think also to that point, are there any opportunities for traffic calming on the Parkway to reduce speeding, such as narrowing the lanes or cameras, et cetera?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You know, I think similar to what Tim said, you know, I think the focus of this particular project is really on the trail and improving the experience for trail users. You know, that said, I think if you have suggestions or comments, we have other folks from DDOT on the line and we can follow up with them about the safety issues on the Parkway itself. I know at times there have been speed cameras out there. And as far as the other things that were suggested, like narrowing the lanes and traffic calming, I'm not the subject matter expert on that, but it's something that we can follow up on and share with our colleagues.
Okay, the next question is, to build interest in this forthcoming improvement, will there be an increased effort to clear garbage, deceased animals, etc., in the short term?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think in the short term, certainly if you see something, say something. If you see illegal dumping happening, if you see deceased animals, there are deer out here. Certainly, call that in or report that into 311. Yeah, as I mentioned before, this is going to be sort of a long haul effort, and we don't mean to, let the trail or the space deteriorate while we're finishing our designs and getting the funding that we need to construct this project. And so, if you see something, say something, and on behalf of DDOT, we'll do the things that we can do in terms of the asphalt paving, the tree maintenance, and we'll do the best that we can working with our partner agencies, the DPW, on the hauling and things like that.
Okay, next question. Can you remind us how the existing trail is planned to extend to the Douglas Bridge? Is there a timeline on the Pomeroy to Firth Sterling section?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I have my colleague, Steph Paperno, on the call, who might be best suited to answer this question.
Sorry, struggling to find the unmute. So we do have plans, as you can see, highlighted. I know it's a little bit zoomed out, but in dark blue is kind of the last remaining gap that will connect you to the new Frederick Douglass Bridge and the ovals, which include nice wide shared use paths there. So we are still waiting to get funding for that section, and it has not yet entered into design, but the team managing that project is actually meeting this week, and we should have a better update to provide you with, Garrett, in the coming weeks on the timeline for the design for that section.
Thanks, Steph.
The next is just a comment and something to put on the record. The person almost got hit last week biking across Suitland Parkway at Stanton Road. A speeding car was making a right turn from the left lane, cut off a bus that was in the right lane, so they didn't see me in the crosswalk and just missed hitting me in the crosswalk with the light. So I think that will speak to, I think maybe to some of the design elements going forward that you're going to be looking at, and we're all very glad that you did not get hit and that you are okay.
Yes, I'm sorry to hear that happened, and thank you for sharing.
The next question is, how will the northern end of the trail connect to the Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge, which I think is the answer that you just gave, correct?
Yeah,
a different end.
no, yeah, I think that's the same. I think maybe I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. As Steph mentioned, the project also is not in design yet at a similar phase to this project. But generally, we think it will continue between the Parkway and Sheridan Road to the north, and then follow the Parkway back across MLK. And I think the specifics of how it crosses MLK are to be determined. But then along Suitland Parkway by the Anacostia Metro, and then tying in to the series of trails that were built as part of the Frederick Douglass Bridge project along Suitland Parkway, which feed into the ovals.
Thank you. The next question is, will safe animal crossings be incorporated into this project, or are they being considered for adjacent projects?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll be honest, it's not something we've talked about in this project yet, although it's hard to think of a better candidate for an animal crossing on a project in the district than this one. So maybe that'll be something that we have to look at. So thanks for bringing that to our attention.
And the next question I have, which looks like it might be the last, but I'll keep scrolling down. Why has DDOT decided to look at this now? Also, are there any cost or timeline estimates?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. Thank you for that question. I think we've been interested in this for some time, and we've been trying to pursue getting the funds to do this phase of study. So it's not something that we suddenly decided to do, but it's something that we've been trying to do for some time. And as I mentioned before, with some of these utilities, I think previous efforts at different times in the past, we at DDOT have thought, well, why don't we just repave the existing trail? And every time those discussions came up, we ran into a whole series of conflicts and problems with the existing layout of the trail. So it is something. As to now, I think now is the time. And then as far as the next phases, I'll scroll back. Typically. We're in what we call the concept engineering phase. We kicked off this project internally last fall and did some of the legwork that we're able to share with you tonight. So we expect to finish this phase of the project this year, later this summer or maybe in the fall, and then move the project into design. I want to be conservative. We don't know the specific timeline for design and construction yet. If this is important to you, certainly let your council member, let your mayor know, that you want to see this project to continue to be funded in the budget. But it will take, this is a several years long process. I don't want to say it's decades long. I don't want to say it's a 6-month process, but it will take some time.
Okay, just give everybody. Oh, we have another question. The other concern with Stanton Road is that it is a hill. You either go down or up, off, or on the trail. There's absolutely no give on the road for a bike. There is a sidewalk, but it is narrow and only on one side of Stanton. And getting off the trail onto Stanton, you cross into oncoming traffic.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, we're not specifically looking at Stanton Road at this point, but that's something that we can take note of and see if there are ways that we can improve that.
I don't see any more questions at this time, and I think all the hands that I saw that were raised actually put their questions in the Q&A. So at this moment, unless somebody has anything else, Mike, I think that's everything. Questions?
Yeah, just two things. I just want to make sure that the people who had their hands raised, if they asked their question, or if they're still, waiting to speak, and then secondarily, if there are any questions that are coming in from the Facebook Live.
We did check. Taylor, who's my colleague, has said she has not seen any, and pretty sure that everybody. Yeah, everybody's hand was raised. Has posted a question in the Q&A.
Are there still hands raised though? People just wishing to speak or make their comments known?
Unfortunately, I am unable to unmute them. And it looks like they're crossed off when I go on them as though they've been answered. Oh, there we go. Okay, so Garrett H., you are unmuted.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Garrett Hennigan from the Washington Area Bicyclist Association. Just wanted to thank you all for putting in all of this effort and starting this process, and for starting with such sort of basic questions of what should this trail be. I do not live in the neighborhood, but I can't even tell you how much time on this trail doing what I could to make it better and use it. And it is an awful experience, as you all know. But despite that, it gets a ton, relatively speaking, a ton of people every day walking and biking along it, because it's a really useful community connection. So I'm really encouraged and excited to see us talking about new community connections to Alabama Avenue, to Southern Avenue, to connect this potential asset to more neighborhoods. And also, I think that while maybe it is worth digging into and really getting lots of feedback on, the notion of pulling the trail back from the road to a more secluded area where you're not facing a wall of traffic and cars barreling down at you at 50 miles an hour. I think that's really enticing. And the few spots of the trail that are pulled back from the road are actually quite lovely. So I think that's very exciting. I did have a question about Alabama Avenue and the bridge. It's an existing structure. The trail narrows down to about 5 or 6 feet. Are there opportunities for widening that section, or are we kind of hemmed in by an existing structure that we probably can't touch? But that's my only question. Thank you so much for the detail and for kicking this off.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Garrett, and thanks for your comments. In regards to the bridge, yes, it is something that we're starting to look at. We don't have a ton of information developed on this yet, but we are going to examine both the opportunity to sort of widen the sidewalk under the bridge, which I think will be fairly limited, but also the opportunity, and again, this is something we're going to look into, so I don't know if it will be feasible yet, but the possibility of tunneling under the bridge, similar to what was done in the Theodore Roosevelt Bridge, where sometimes these old bridges behind the wall, it's just empty space or ground. So in that case, there was a tunnel that was built through the bridge. That was also a historic bridge. So that this is just to say that we're looking into it. So we don't have any specifics if it's feasible, if it's not feasible yet. But it is something that we're thinking about.
Okay, I'm going to unmute. Come on. There.
This is
So,
Ab Jordan.
yes,
This
there
is
we
Ab
go.
Jordan.
Great. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so very much. I have a question about how did you bring together or create the project team? And the reason I'm raising this concern is, as you know, the ANC law requires that ANCs are involved before you finalize the plan. And I would think that it would be helpful if the ANCs could participate as part of the team. I'm a former ANC commissioner, but one of the things I realize is that many times plans are brought to us. In fact, ANCs are treated merely in terms of meeting with us as just nothing more than another public meeting. And the responsibility or the rights that are provided to ANCs under the law are greater than just a public participant. So my question is there any intent to try to have someone from the affected ANCs to participate in the project team? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Ab. And I think to get directly to it is yes. So we're just kicking off this project. We sent out this meeting to all the affected ANCs, of which there are many. This is a big project. I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but maybe Karen does. I want to say it's 4 or 5 ANCs and maybe 9 single member districts. So we're certainly reaching out directly to the SMD commissioners, and we'd like to come to all the meetings and provide an update. So there will be many opportunities for us to engage with the ANCs before any final recommendations are developed. So I do want to reiterate too, if you'd like to invite us to your meeting, either an ANC or a community group, I'd be happy to attend and come give an update, and not just an update, but to collect feedback and gather input. And I wanted to just echo something you said. The ANCs do have special rights and privileges, but we do give them great weight. They're the only organizations that we are required by law to give great weight. So we will be looking certainly to receive endorsements from the ANCs as this project moves forward.
Okay, I'm going to go to Steve. Let me see if I can unmute Steve. Oh, there we go. Steve, you're unmuted.
All right. I guess this is just a comment, and I've been here in the Southeast area for over 20 years now. And I just want to thank you guys for actually acknowledging this trail, because honestly, I don't think I've ever seen anyone on the Suitland Parkway Trail before. And like, I ride my bike, catch the bus, drive, and everything over here in Southeast, and I never seen anyone on that trail before. So I guess thanks for actually like trying to help revitalize it and make it better, because I think this is definitely a trail that actually needs that.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate that. And something you said and something Ab said reminded me of something that I neglected to say when I gave my presentation too. As I mentioned, there's a lot of documentation on the history of the Parkway itself, but not so much of the trail. So, a lot of the longtime residents, if you have memories of when the trail was built, or maybe even pictures of it, or memories of using the trail, maybe when you were a kid, back in the 90s when we think it was first built, we'd love to hear those stories if you have them. So thank you.
Chris Roll, I'm pretty sure that you've been waiting, so I'm gonna. There we go.
Am I good?
You were. Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Listen, I just want to thank you all for this too. This is very important what you're doing. Echoing Steve and Garrett and some of the other folks on here. I live in a Douglas neighborhood, which is right by Stanton, and I've been there for 15, almost 18 years now. And I absolutely ride my bike a lot, and I drive the trail too on my car and all of that stuff. And I do see a lot of people in the neighborhood actually using the trail. A lot of people are walking just to get on it, to cross it, to get to the other side. And I think if you look at the trail, you'll see how important it is to the community. Where look at the trail where the paths are made, the dirt paths are made where it crosses. You'll see it on Southern. You'll see it near, I think it's 23rd or 28th. You'll see a lot of paths how people have made their own crossings to it, if you will. I mean, people really don't use Stanton because that's a tough game, because you only have one walkway to get a crosswalk on that, and depending on which way you're going, you're going into oncoming traffic, and it's just a real tough thing. But let me just say this, forget about all that. I just hope something gets done on this, because I see so much being done for Metro Branch Trail, that'll get done. Rock Creek, that'll get done. But it seems like over here, it just doesn't get done. And what's so important about this trail is what it means economically to our neighborhoods. I mean, I'll just give you this real quick. I live in a Douglas neighborhood, and the biggest problem, one of the biggest things that we have is that we're so landlocked there. We're landlocked by the Suitland Parkway. We're landlocked by Alabama and Stanton Road. It's just so hard to get out, to get to a park or anything unless you have a car. I mean, the kids in our Canson Parkway townhouses I live in, they can only really play in the back, alleys, and they have to get out real quick, so the cars don't come by. It'd be so nice for them to go down and be able to get to the Anacostia Park, to be able to get to the other side of the river where, right now, it's really hard to do that unless you go down Stanton, or now you can go down Alabama, cut through the new Congress Heights, complex they made that will take you to the other side to MLK, and then that can take you down to Howard that way too. So you're really left with really not many choices how to get out unless you drive your car or you take the train, which is like about $4 or $5 depending on when you get out. To be able to have this connect cleanly to the Frederick Douglass Bridge, I mean, I can't tell you how much money that would save people just on transportation costs alone. And sometimes I wish it would just understand that, because I know if I do on this trail and don't drive my car or anything, just use my bike or walk, whatever, you just save a ton of money, and it's just so expensive just on that alone. And yes, there's a lot of problems on the trail. I mean, I won't pine too much on it. One of the problems is obviously the terrain. I mean, you're looking at a 5 or 6% grade hill when you're going up, towards Maryland near Southern, to bike up it. I mean, it's a little bit of a climb, so it's not like, as easy as it can be. But I hope something gets done on this one way or another, because I mean, I just tweeted out something now about the trail, how, there's always debris on it. I mean, at most, if we don't get everything, we just got to take what we can get, because right now, I mean, it's just bad. I mean, even when cars crash, they just stay on the trail for, it could be 5 or 6 days at a time before they even get towed. I mean, you see so much of that on there. So hopefully, something would come of this. And I'm just want to say I appreciate you taking this challenge on, and I know the challenge you're going to go through, particularly with a lot of the pushback you're going to get. But it really would help out the community as a whole. So thank you, and I'll keep doing what I can to improve the trail. So keep it up.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
And then the last person who's been very patient is Mr. Harrington. Try and get this unmuted. There he is. Okay.
Chat, but thank you.
Mr. Harrington, we can hear you now.
Yeah, thanks for calling on me, but I think my question was already answered in the chat. It was about the lighting.
Super. Okay.
And I understand the safety concerns. I've definitely, my organization, we've done a lot of cleaning of the woods along the Parkway, and we've seen some terrible crashes while we've been there. And we've had some close calls for ourselves. But my end, from what I've heard and read, people actually drive faster when a road is brightly lit. A dark road is actually a form of traffic calming. And obviously it's altering the historic character of it and having a lot of potentially negative effect on the wooded lands adjacent. So I do have concerns about the proposal for lighting, although I respect the intentions behind it.
Thank you for that, Nathan.
Sure.
Okay. And I'm double checking over on the Q&A, and I don't see any new questions on the Q&A, and nobody else has their hand up.
Great. Well, I think we're right at about when we said the meeting would go to. We're happy to stay and answer questions as long as there are people here asking them. But if there are no further questions, again, you just say, please take the survey. We'll be sharing that in the chat. I can't see the chat, so I can assume it's already been shared. Email me my information. My name is Michael Alvino. It's michael.alvino@dc.gov. As well as we have a website for all the trails in the district. And if you go to this page, it'll take you to the Suitland Parkway Trail page, where we'll be posting updates. As we mentioned, the YouTube video of the recording will be available within 7 days. We'll be posting a link to that on the page, as well as the survey and this meeting presentation as well. So please tell your neighbors, share this information, and we look forward to connecting with you and hearing your feedback. So thank you. And with that, I believe that we can adjourn the meeting. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of this unusually warm February week. Thank you.